This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grassroots Professional Network's webinar on Wikipedia for Public Affairs Professionals. Wikipedia has become a piece of our daily lives, but small businesses and associations often fall short when it comes to using these tools. Did you know that other online platforms are increasingly using it to determine the SEO scores and even affect your Facebook outreach? So we want to make sure and list off how public affairs professionals can really utilize this tool and maximize their association's outreach and message amplification. I am here with Josh Green. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Josh is the CEO of the Mather Group, which is a digital agency that companies manage how they're found online through Wikipedia and search engine optimization. He also drives targeted and high volume leads for business to business companies. Prior to the Mather Group, Josh was the VP of marketing for both 1-800-PACK-RAT and Zippy Show, where he was responsible for all marketing, including online and offline, and even launching national television campaigns. Prior to 1-800-PACK-RAT, Green was actually the vice president of member services for shop.org. There he actually collaborated with the National Retail Federation's government relations staff. I believe, Josh, you executed policy and advocacy strategies on behalf of shop.org. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
All right. You were also the liaison for shop.org's policy advocacy group, and you developed industry initiatives and managed shop.org's Ray M. Greenlee Scholarship Fund. Josh, we cannot be more excited to have you with us and to hear more about how we can execute Wikipedia strategies.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be here and talk about Wikipedia, which is just a fascinating topic. And one of the sort of key questions that we always start out with is what is Wikipedia and what is it intended to be? It's designed to be a free encyclopedia written collaboratively by the people who are using it. It's done using Wikipedia software, a wiki, and people are constantly improving Wikipedia. There are thousands of changes per hour that get recorded and implemented and become sort of the Wikipedia pages that you know, love, and see all sorts of different places. And it's important. I think everyone knows that it's important, but some of the reasons are really crucial. It becomes almost a definitive source for consumers, investors, and press in terms of an objective research tool. People tend to look at association web pages as the association's version of things, and Wikipedia as an objective truth almost. It also almost always ranks in the top 3 on Google for just about any keyword, person, or place. It's upwards of 380 million unique views per day. And if you look at the top right side of a Google search on your desktop, you'll notice that almost all of the results that you see in the top right there for companies and associations have the little powered by Wikipedia sort of notification on there as well. So plays a huge role in everyone's day-to-day internet life. One of the most common questions is, how does a Wikipedia page get created? And usually what happens is someone who's very interested in a particular subject decides to write a Wikipedia page. They use the Wikipedia markup language to create the page, and then there are 2 major ways that that page actually goes from a draft to becoming live. One is it gets submitted, which is what everyone tends to think of when you think of submitting a page for review and going live, where it then goes into a backlog that's edited by Wikipedia editors and eventually given a thumbs up or thumbs down and goes live. There's also another option where groups can publish directly into namespace and a page will immediately go live, but that tends to have a much higher chance of a page being immediately rejected. So a lot of what you'll see is people submitting pages. And the example on the left is just of some of the Wikipedia source code that goes into a typical association page. And we'll take a look into that a little bit more in just a minute or two. One of the key things that everyone has internalized about Wikipedia is the idea that everyone can edit Wikipedia pages at any time. The interesting thing is that there is a lot more that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to updating of the pages. First of all, for a long time, there was quite a bit of a technical barrier where the only way to edit Wikipedia pages, much like the beginning of the web and HTML, was using the Wikipedia markup code. And you'll see on the right, that looks fairly complicated and frankly fairly daunting if you don't have a background in coding. A few years back, Wikipedia rolled out something called visual editing, which is much more like a word processing type of situation where you can visually edit the changes you want to make to Wikipedia pages. And that took down some of the barriers to editing, in that you didn't necessarily need to know how all the coding was working on the back end, although it was still helpful because you could understand how citations worked, different things could get inserted, and what some of the different formatting options were. So there are a lot of different pieces that go into the back of a Wikipedia page when you see the end result on the left that's there. One of the other interesting things about this is you'll see a lot of information that's going to be very interesting and that you're going to care about what it says. In this example for the American Medical Association, you can see that there is a tremendous amount of content going on here for the AMA, and it goes all the way down to June 2018, where the AMA is talking about gun control, and it goes back to the 1930s. And you can see that there's a lot of value judgments going on about some of the lobbying that's gone on. So that's definitely something that is going to be of extreme interest to many, many people on this call. And the ability to change that is also very, very important. One of the interesting things and little known features of the Wikipedia editing software is on any page, if you click on view history, sort of in the top right of the page, and we'll do a number of examples later on, you can see exactly when it was edited and what was edited. So that's tremendously useful to see if the page you're concerned with has a lot of history of people modifying it, if it hasn't been touched for a while, and who's modifying it and why. So that's really a key tool that's available to anyone to see what's been going on. And if we click on it for the AMA, you can see a variety of the different edits that have gone on, going from August of 2018 back to December of 2017. And if I clicked on 500 here, probably going back a decade or so. And what you see in all of this coding is when that edit was made, who the editor was made, who the edit was made by, what the editor has done in the past, how that's actually impacted the size of the page, and what the editor has said about the edit. So you'll see things that are human edits. A lot of times you'll see internet bots that will clean up links that are on pages. And then you can also find out more about the people made the edits. And many of these edits actually have an undo button here that can undo the edit if an editor thinks that it's inaccurate. So there's all sorts of different philosophies and approaches to editing that go on in the back end of the Wikipedia pages. And you'll also see that while some people are editing as usernames, you'll also see people editing from IP addresses because for whatever reason they want to be a little bit more anonymous than people with the usernames here. So that sort of leads into the editor's discussion, and a quote from Orwell always seems particularly appropriate, that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. You have a couple different levels of editors on the background, and there's a variety of mechanisms to keep Wikipedia robust and not vandalized. One of the interesting things that's out there is it's very possible to get banned from Wikipedia, either under your username or as an IP address, because of undesirable actions for the Wikipedia community. Where this comes up a lot is we see companies and associations editing their own page, which is a no-no that I'll talk about. But if they're editing them directly from their company headquarters, it's likely that that IP address is known. So if I'm sitting in, say, IBM's corporate headquarters editing the IBM page, it's not unusual to see a block of just a single IP address or almost an entire range being blocked due to some of the issues that brings up. And we'll talk about how you can deal with that and how you can avoid that when working on your page. It's interesting and particularly applicable. People have written bots that can actually tweet anonymous Wikipedia edits from IP addresses that are associated with the US Congress. So if you're sitting at your desk in your representative's office and you decide to edit a page about something, this Twitter account is devoted to publishing those sorts of facts. So the ability to be anonymous is not quite as great as you might initially think that it is. Wikipedians love more than editing Wikipedia, a running joke goes, is arguing about how Wikipedia gets edited. A lot of times when you're editing Wikipedia, there's a tendency to want to go in and after realizing there's an ability to edit pages, immediately editing everything as quickly as possible and getting it as up to date as possible. And really sort of taking a slow and steady approach, if you're editing a Wikipedia page, leads to less risk of your edits getting reverted, and gives you a little more time to learn about the language and the nuances and best practices, and gives you a greater chance for success if you do decide to start editing Wikipedia pages. There are a number of important rules as we go into the process, and a couple that are key are the neutral point of view. One of the things that people who are in advocacy or marketing love is to use adjectives. Wikipedia, being designed as an encyclopedia, really likes a neutral point of view. So a lot of times things will get taken down because they're not neutral. And another reason that things get taken down is copyright violation. Because of the licensing that Wikipedia uses and its desire to be an open source, if something has been published elsewhere on the internet, it can often get taken down for copyright violations. And this can be sort of particularly frustrating if you've sort of written the perfect description of your association for, say, an annual report, and you find out that you can't use it for Wikipedia because either it doesn't have a neutral point of view or because it's considered a copyright violation because it's appeared somewhere else. So a lot of times you have to take a look at whether or not you rewrite it or approach it a little bit differently. Another one that's crucial, number 4 and 5, is the notability factor. Wikipedia is looking for notable entries, which are defined as subjects that have received a lot of coverage in third-party publications. So just having your own website or blog isn't there. You need to have been covered extensively, and that tends to trip up a number of editors as well. On the other hand, most public affairs professionals that I know are working on what are defined as notable under Wikipedia. So fortunately, that doesn't become as much of an issue as it sometimes does elsewhere. In terms of sources for Wikipedia, self-published sources don't necessarily or don't work generally. So blogs, official websites, annual reports, your social media, those aren't considered citations. You need to think about it more as as almost an academic paper where you need citations from third-party sources. So news sources like the Times or the Post are great. Blogs from trusted sources like potentially the Smithsonian are needed. A lot of times you'll see that some of the self-published sources have snuck into the association pages. The reason for that is sometimes there's just information that does not show up anywhere else. And because Wikipedia will sort of assume good faith if it's an established page, you will see some of those citations stick. But if you're starting from scratch, you're really going to want to make sure you use as much news coverage as you possibly can. Another interesting thing about the Wikipedia pages in those top menu items is there's what's called the talk page. So if there's a particularly controversial or new section that you might be adding to a page, you can look at the talk page where people will discuss edits before they make them. So if there's a grammar change, you might see people just go ahead and make it. If there's a discussion on, for example, the political position of an organization, you'll see that there's a discussion there before edits get made. So instead of having what's called an edit war with changes to the page going back and forth, you can talk about it a little bit to see if there's some sort of consensus among the editors who are interested in that page in terms of how to define things. It's also helpful to see historically what's been going on with that page. You'll see from some of the edits up there, they go back to 2008. So there have been discussions going back 10 years practically to when Wikipedia was started, I would guess, about certain aspects of particular pages. And one of the interesting things is a lot of people get frustrated when they start editing and edits get reverted. There's a long and storied history of Wikipedia edit wars going on for a long time. There were years of discussion about whether it was Danzig or Gdansk, referring to the city, just people get very entrenched in their viewpoints. So that's sort of key to keep in mind as you're editing. Is generally it's not just a one-time thing. It's something you need to keep an eye on going forward. In terms of how to approach Wikipedia and the editing that goes on with it, there are three key things we like to think about and sort of talk about. One is what needs updating. Are you looking at an entire page overhaul, or you just need to update some facts and figures? There's a question of who do you want to do it. This can be a thing that drives people in communications crazy for a variety of reasons that we'll get to. But also, whose responsibility is it going to be? What is their availability? And how are you going to manage it? A lot of times it can be, fairly low key, but then during times of lots of political activity, things may require updates a lot more frequently. And what's the process going to be for thinking about that? There are also a number of things that can cause problems in the Wikipedia world, and we'll just go through a few of those and some of the common things that happen. Wikipedia can get edited at any time. False or biased information is another significant issue. And also just controversies. Wikipedia has an appetite for controversies and showing all parts of controversies, which can lead to both press calls and unhappy CEOs. So learning some of the things that happen and what you can do about them is important in the Wikipedia world. Another thing that's sort of going on and continues to go on, in early 2018, YouTube announced that it might use Wikipedia content to provide context around videos on their site. It's a key thing to be aware of. Just as Wikipedia is seen as the world's encyclopedia, it seems to keep popping up in more and more locations. And then the fact that it can get edited at any time makes things a little bit tricky. You can see here all of these times that this particular page was being edited are in Greenwich Mean Time. Some of them are not particularly helpful or when any of your staff might be around. And it can also get edited, days after you've just come out with something really important, or it could be a month or two later. So it's important to keep an eye on that. There's a really good plugin that lets you watch Wikipedia pages that'll just increment in your browser if the pages that you're interested in get edited. Which can help with managing this challenge to it. You see a lot of false information pop up, especially in terms of hoaxes or false deaths. Usually, if there's something funny that showed up on Wikipedia, it's usually a change that got reverted pretty quickly, and someone's gotten a screenshot of it. But you see that a lot. When people get declared dead by the internet, someone will update their Wikipedia page and it'll stay there for a couple minutes until it gets corrected. Biased information is also another category that you can run into. You'll notice that certain pages, especially religious or highly controversial political pages, will just be locked so that either no one can edit or only a very finite number of editors can edit, and there'll be an actual discussion on the talk page before literally any single edit will occur. And those pages have been locked just because of the nature of some of the edit wars that have broken out over them over time. And then controversies. I've worked with a number of companies and associations where controversies just take up a disproportionate amount of space. There have been a couple companies where they've been billion-dollar companies, and there's literally 2 paragraphs of information about the company and pages of information about a controversy that they may have been involved in. So if you're in a space where that tends to happen, it's important to keep an eye on this and see what's going on, and then what you want to do if you want to react to it. What we usually like to do here, Eric, and I'm going to jump into this in just a moment, is look through some Wikipedia pages, talk about what's going on, look at the code, make some suggestions for people, and hopefully there'll be a lot of similarities between what we see on some of these pages and some of the unique situations that you may be having as well. So the first one that I like to pull up, and I'm going to pull up, is the American Medical Association, because it's almost a microcosm of the Wikipedia universe in just one page. So we'll just pull up the Medical Association here. I think this is pretty readable on screen. If it's not, Eric, just let me know. What you see here is the page has been cited at the top for a number of issues, and these are going back to 2009 in terms of needing more citations for verification. And then in 2017, someone had flagged it for promotion through exaggeration of facts. One of the things that is always interesting is you can see in the code when that was put there. And if you decide to edit a page, and we'll talk about Wiki's conflict of interest rules in a minute, you want to keep an eye on these things and try and address them if a particular page has been flagged. Let's see. Also, I don't know if we had Eric. You might want to just check on the mic as well if we have a couple other requests. I'll get to those in a second. So we've got the mission here, we've got the history, we've got the structure. If you hit one of these buttons and you say we're going into edit, one thing I would counsel is most people working for an organization want to edit that organization's page. That does fall into Wikipedia's conflict of interest category, so you'd want typically to want to declare that in the talk page. But if you click on edit for a page, you'll come right into the code here, and you'll see that each of these equates to one of the paragraphs that you're seeing on the page. And over here with this pencil, we can switch to visual editing and make visual edits. I'm not going to save anything, but let's say we wanted to say have been considered controversial. If I hit publish changes here, I suspect it would be reverted very quickly because I'm not putting any citations in there to reaffirm that. But if I look through here, I can see that the membership is listed in 2012 and really needs to be updated. So that might be something that I could go in and update and would be particularly useful there. If I click on talk, as we discussed earlier, you can see the talk pages. One of the interesting things is there are a lot of projects designed to improve pages around particular topics. So, companies in Chicago, companies are projects that are involved in medicine and organizations. And you can see there's an awful lot of talk pages here about the different things that are going on, restrictions on membership. So there's discussions about those. So if I was editing this page, what I would do is I would want to get up to date just from a fact standpoint because we're a little behind it here. And then I would look at some of these things and see what is opinion and what is fact and how I might want to address that accordingly. So let's see who else we have. I'm going to pull up a company just to provide some contrast. So here in the DC area where I am, Fiscal Note has been in the news a lot recently, and you can see that they've been flagged for having a contributor having a close connection with its subject. That's not terribly unusual in the company space, but you see that they've been updated recently, which, someone updated that they bought CQ and Roll Call, which is of interest. They've done a nice job of sort of showing the acquisitions that have happened. Corporate culture is always interesting. Sometimes that makes its way in, sometimes it gets taken out. I think it's interesting the offices are described as flat. That might not be how I would describe it. And then recognitions and impacts. So they've done pretty well on having some of their recognition here. So in general, I would say that's a pretty nice page. And then what I'd be curious about over time is they've got a couple value judgments over here. The hopes to reach all 200 countries by 2019. I wouldn't be surprised to see that not stick over time, just because it's not a fact at this point. And it's interesting, Entrepreneur Magazine is not always considered the most authoritative in the Wikipedia world. So I think that the folks at Fiscal Note have done a nice job updating their page. And if I was digging into it a little bit more, I might look at the talk page. So the talk page seems like there hasn't been a lot of talk. And then I might look at the history here, and you can see that especially back in February and March of 2018, it's been a pretty active page. And then what I thought I'd do, Eric, is also pull up a university just to get a little flavor of sort of one of everything as we're going through this, and talk about how a university which has its own different set of concerns might address things. And you can see, especially when you go back a ways, you've got a ton of history and tradition, and given Wikipedia's roots a little bit in academia, you get a little bit more in terms of the encyclopedia feel, in terms of an alma mater and some of the academics. One of the other really fascinating things with Wikipedia is because of the licensing, a lot of what you see in the way of pictures has to be images with no rights attached. And a lot of times, especially for individuals, that'll be pictures that look like selfies. So if you're wondering why your favorite association, CEO, or politician has an unposed photo, it's generally because those are the ones that can get uploaded to Wikimedia Commons, as opposed to a paid professional photographer that's there. So you'll see colleges with a lot of pictures, usually because there aren't rights associated with it. And when you get to associations, you might see one or two pictures because it's much tougher to sort of find an appropriate link there. And then you'll also see for the university, it got a peer review, so that would have some ideas on improving the page. You can go back to 2006, where there was a brief debate about how to actually pronounce it. So it appears to be Duquesne. And then you have, a number of other different discussions, and you get into controversies even at universities with labor and employment discussions. And then what I thought I'd do, we had the National Association of Real Estate Brokers came up. You can end up with pages that get flagged for being written like an advertisement. This one's had this flag on since 2010, so there's an opportunity to clean that up. Just reading through this, I think I would probably give some thought to taking off the template tag, which an editor can do in the history section. They can see when it was put there. And in the code section, you can see that there's sort of this advertisement. If the page has been changed enough in the past 8 years, you could probably have it taken off without too much problem. What the issue is that I think we'd see with this page is just the whole current section hasn't been touched in what looks like 8 years. So you could probably bring this up to date with more information, put it up here, and really have a much stronger page going on with more information about the organization and who's involved in it currently. It looks like someone went in and updated the current board, but there's a lot more opportunity. And I think one of the interesting things about it is this first sentence here is what shows up in Wikipedia in the top right. So if this gets updated, you would have a little bit more in terms of updated descriptions showing up in both the Google search results and the knowledge graph on the right side. And then for the last one I've got on my list is just a charitable trust, to see how that sort of works. And we'll go through this one, and then Eric, we can wrap up after this one if that sounds good to you.
Sounds great.
Okay. So this is a charitable trust. It's fairly abbreviated. It's interesting. It could use just a tweak of updating in that it's talking about 2016, but someone's updated the grants in terms of 2018 in terms of what it's given away. If I was updating this, I'd probably just add a little bit of a tagline in terms of what they're focused on, giving away, in terms of what their objective is. There's some political organization stuff. So this is, the type of thing that if the organization wanted to, could really clear this up, because it's saying that it does and does not simultaneously give to what may or may not be hate groups. So certainly from an advocacy side, you'd like to present the facts, and also the whole thing of recent years is something that might be potentially adjusted as well, in terms of when was that and what happened. It may be that this was something in the past that's been addressed, or it hasn't been addressed, but for people who are doing research on the charitable trust, they'd probably want to know a little bit more information about it, and just addressing it here provides an opportunity to address that, and maybe at the very least reduce the number of questions that get directed to association staff in terms of how they're approaching the messaging with it, and just being consistent across the entire thing as well. It looks like there's been some talk about this in 2018 in January, discussing about the board members and, what the mission is. So there's obviously been some discussion, and what's nice here is someone who works for the organization and mentioned that they had a conflict of interest because they work there, requested that these things being done, and then they were implemented. So this is an example of the dialogue that sort of goes on behind the scenes, and you can sort of see this continuing and continuing. So there's been a lot of discussion. So it looks like the organization is doing the right things in terms of dealing with this, and it's probably, I suspect, an ongoing effort, and probably not particularly fun to wade through the nuances of Wikipedia, but it is helping and deal with it from an image standpoint. So that's sort of a sample, across a variety of types of Wikipedia pages to provide some of the look and feel of what's going on. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention was, if you have any questions as a result of this, Eric, I'd be happy to, answer any that people have through either my email or just setting up a strategy session to talk through what's going on with their Wikipedia pages.
That would be great. Thank you so much for offering that. One question I do have is, it's great for you to run through for some of our friends over at the AMA, but a lot of us have state chapters. I see we have the Pennsylvania Optometric Association on the call today. Do you think it's best for some of these state societies to go ahead and get out on their own and have their own page? Or do you think it's better if they sort of tag on to the national page?
It really depends on their particular circumstances. A lot of times, if you're a state association, you may have a little bit less in the way of resources, and publishing a page can be challenging if you're doing one from scratch. So it depends on what the motivation is. In general, it probably makes a little bit more sense to have a section on the overall organization page, just to get a feel for sort of the Wikipedia world and what you might want to have on there, and what you can and can't do, and probably most importantly, what resources you have to deal with it. And then if that sort of works well, and you want to expand, or it may be that you can sort of meet your goals very specifically by being part of the overall organization's page, you can explore, but I would certainly lean towards dipping your toe in the water. Trying to set up your own page can be time consuming, and also if it doesn't get published can be very frustrating if you've invested a bunch of time and energy to have a page and then it gets rejected once or twice. That's going to kill a lot of the appetite for doing anything with Wikipedia. So with just about anything here, I'd sort of say dip your toes in the water first.
Great, great. And we also have a few associations on the call today that are from smaller sections of the industry, like the American College of Wound Healing and Tissue Repair. For something that's as niche and segmented as that audience is, do you think that's advantageous for them to sort of relay back to some of the more well-known pages, or do you think that's something that they need to go outside Wikipedia to do?
Well, if I just pull up a Google search, you can see that they've got sort of a nice Google presence here for people finding information on them. And then there's a number of places sort of covering them. So in some ways, I would say this is a pretty solid Google presence that they could even tweak a little bit with SEO to have this little fragment removed and a little bit more information on what they do here. So I would say it depends a lot on the objectives of the organization. I think by Wikipedia standards, if we click on news, I'm sure there's plenty of profiles about them if we were sort of to dig down through this. But part of the other challenge is being part of a small association is you have only so many resources to do things. So it might be that you have some college students are involved who might be able to do this, but a lot of times it really just depends on what the strategic goals of the organization are at this point. But I would absolutely say they're going to qualify for a Wikipedia page. It's more a question of time involved and investment.
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. I love that you already had the Google search pulled up. That made it too easy.
Yeah. Well, we can always try another one, but if they had a Wikipedia page, they'd have the space taken up over here. It just depends on what their goals sort of are with doing that.
Of course. And if you don't mind if I throw a curveball at you here, we have a question about some of the fake news that's going on. And of course, it looks like that YouTube and Facebook are really kind of passing the buck off to Wikipedia and using them as a tool to sort of wade through some of the things that aren't so credible. Obviously, that isn't an end-all be-all fix, but do you think SNC Wikipedia becoming a major instrument tool for any members that are trying to do any paid advertising or anything like that through Google or Facebook?
I think that it's probably increasingly important to try and make sure that your Wikipedia page has the most accurate information that you possibly can, because if we look at sort of general topics, and I'll just try a couple here while we're talking. Let's say maybe not medical management, but wound care or something. Wikipedia is going to have not just topics on particular organizations, but it's going to have them on general category pieces of information. So let's say we're over here in Wikipedia and we want to do wound healing. You can see that pages like this are pretty extensive, so that if someone is in Google and doing a search on wound healing, that Wikipedia result's going to come up here. It's going to come up here. So for a lot of people, that's going to seem like the definitive answer. So if you've got a debate going on, or an opportunity to update your Wikipedia page, that's going to be huge, because just like the charitable organization we saw, if you just took a brief glance at it, all that would stick in your mind is maybe something hate groups, which, if I had to guess, it seems unlikely a charity would be giving to hate groups. But now that's sort of out there and maybe lodged subconsciously. So I think more than ever, if you have information that needs to be accurate or correct, the last thing you want to do is have it lingering out there on something like Wikipedia, which people tend to think of as objective truth. And as you mentioned, companies like YouTube are relying on it, let alone how much shelf space it's taking up in Google.
Of course, of course. Well, Josh, thank you so much. I think that about wraps up all the questions right now. We really appreciate it. Again, if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Josh. And if you would like to join the conversation online, please follow us on social media. Use the hashtag Voice of Advocacy to continue anything further. We are, of course, on all the major platforms. And please see our website for this recording, as well as any of the other recordings of our live panels, or any assets that we have online. Josh, again, I just want to thank you so much for all of us here. I think this is a platform that we use on a daily basis, but we don't really utilize as public affairs professionals. And I think we can all do a little bit better at utilizing this. And unfortunately, the information just isn't out there. So I really appreciate you spending your time with us today, and I hope you'll join us again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Eric. I enjoyed it, and I'm always happy to answer questions for anyone.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great day.